Welcome back into another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Chiefs Training Camp Report. Day 18 of full team practice has wrapped in St. Joseph, Missouri. There's only one more practice to go, and I'm sure Pete Sweeney is glad to hear that. And before I actually welcome Pete on, I want to let you guys know that there will be no Arrowhead Pride Editors show today. We had some conflicts come up later in the afternoon. So no editor show this week. It'll be back next week after the Chiefs preseason game number 2, previewing their preseason finale and catching up on all the news. And luckily tonight, Chiefs Coast to Coast is live at 6 p.m. So they'll get you caught up on everything that you need to know. So without further ado, let me welcome in the leader of Arrowhead Pride, Pete Sweeney. One day to go, one more drive to St. Joseph, Missouri. How we feeling?
Yeah, feels pretty good. And I got to say, normally when we're up here all month, it's just consecutive days of really, really hot weather. This is probably the most comfortable training camp has been altogether ever, and that is quite a feat just considering of how long it was. So enjoyed the cool weather in St. Joe this year.
Yeah, it's been nice around the Kansas City area and up there. The weather's great. With all the storms and stuff that we've been having, I don't really know what it says about the state of the world and everything, but nice to have a few cool days during Chiefs training camp. Not practicing on Wednesday, defensive tackle Chris Jones, yet to report. Obviously, you'll know as soon as we do if the Chiefs work out a long-term deal with him. Cornerback Nick Jones, also out of practice. Wide receiver Nico Remigio, also out. Cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, Kadarius Toney, Tershawn Wharton. Yeah, you doing okay there, Pete? Getting a little loud here in the background. Also, offensive lineman Nick Allegretti left practice early with the shoulder injury. But other than that, wide receiver Justin Ross was back on the field and looked pretty good in today's practice. So what were the takeaways from Wednesday's session?
Yeah, I think the injury bug has kind of caught the Chiefs a little bit here, and you're hoping it isn't significant injuries. You're hoping that it's not key players for the Chiefs. I continue to wonder about L'Jarius Sneed. I continue to wonder about Turk Wharton, but they haven't been placed on any lists at this point. But you never want to have players out for this long and the knee being mentioned. We know that it's been a swelling issue for L'Jarius Sneed. Turk Wharton had been on the field after repair of his ACL, and it's a little alarming that he still hasn't retaken the field. I believe it's been about 4 or 5 practice days, the game included. Isaiah Pacheco continues to look pretty good, and then we'll end up seeing about Chris Jones and Nico Remigio, and obviously there's a couple of other guys here. But yeah, good to see both Justin Ross and Amir Smith-Marset back on the field today after some scares yesterday.
So I want to ask you a little bit about Pacheco and Turk Wharton, but first sticking with the wide receivers, obviously. So Ross had a touchdown catch today after leaving early. Obviously, huge sigh of relief for the Kansas City Chiefs fan base. But I think the guy that maybe after the first preseason game we should be talking about a little bit more, and I know Justin Ross is the hype train player from this training camp, and everybody wants to see him succeed. It's a great story across the NFL if he finds a way to have an impact this season for the Chiefs, but rookie wide receiver Rashee Rice got some work with the ones in the Chiefs' first preseason action, and then he was also in the mix on Wednesday, catching a touchdown during practice, left the field for a little bit, headed to the medical tent, but then came back out, was back on the field, seems fine. I feel like we're kind of overlooking Rashee Rice for the Justin Ross hype right now when Rice is getting more looks with the first team.
Yeah, and I'm going to sound like a little bit of a hater here because I know everyone who listens to this knows that I didn't really feel like Justin Ross would be on the team ahead of camp. I had to see that he would be a part of the first team offense, and we have seen him take snaps with Patrick Mahomes and stay healthy. But I think what I'm seeing now, and you just have Jody Fortson go on IR this week, I think the Chiefs really like him as this red zone threat. You know, you look at the 6'4" Jody Fortson, you have the 6'4" Justin Ross, and yeah, he's a little bit, I guess, less weight, I think 10, 15 pounds, but still it's going to provide that big target that can go up and get it for you in the red zone. You know, you see him in the middle of the field. I feel like these guys that are playing defensive back for the Chiefs have been able to have pretty good coverage on Ross, and I just don't know about that separation. Maybe he grows into that, right? This is still his first football action in a couple years here. So we'll see about Ross. I certainly feel like he's going to have a role on this team, but I think maybe it's more in that red zone forcing role. Whereas I think Rashee Rice maybe should be getting more attention than a Justin Ross. This was a guy that was actually taken in the NFL draft on day 2. And B, I think what you saw in the preseason game is kind of what the Chiefs have been seeing, especially recently in training camp. This is a receiver that is a little bit atypical in the fact that I think there are some promising signs that he could contribute in year 1. I think he feels right now a little bit further along than potentially Sky Moore did his first year. I think Sky has looked great now in his second year, but I'm talking about Sky last year versus Rashee Rice this year. I'm pretty optimistic about a potential role for Rashee Rice. He does look to have an understanding of the playbook. That's something that I asked him the other day. He feels pretty good about it, which is, I think, further along than some rookies can say. He's been asking veterans for help, and I think you saw it in the game. I mean, he has just a look and feel of an NFL receiver who's going to be productive, and I wonder if he bucks that trend of the first-year receiver in Andy Reid's offense not really being able to be all that productive. I'm optimistic on Rice.
Yeah, and you mentioned it about the Chiefs rookie wide receivers, and we know they're going to start him out slow, but if he makes an impact when he is on the field for the Chiefs, especially while they're trying to get Kadarius Toney on the field, he could find a way into a significant amount of playing time early in his Kansas City Chiefs career. And I think what I liked that we saw from him in the preseason game was how they were utilizing him on the wide receiver screen, because you noticed it as soon as he caught the ball. Like, he's big, but he's got more speed than you think. And he's going to be a tough guy to bring down. And we know the Chiefs love those wide receiver screens. So that's an easy way for them to get him on the field early on.
We've seen 2 receivers in what you would describe as the like McCole Hardman type of role in St. Joe. And it's been Sky Moore. He would typically get some of those first snaps where, you're seeing the pre-snap motion and the end arounds, but then they've also done some of that stuff with Rashee Rice. And you wonder if maybe he can be that role player, bigger size than McCole Hardman. Certainly, I think there's more optimism for him being this downfield receiver. I think maybe more than Cole was ever able to do in Kansas City. But I just think it's interesting that there have been 2 players that they're really leaning into, and one of them is Sky Moore, and the other is Rashee Rice.
And you mentioned running back Isaiah Pacheco. We haven't talked about him a ton just because he's still all throughout training camp, been in that non-contact jersey and not heavily involved, but getting in a few reps here and there. I think we're still 3 weeks away from the start of the regular season for the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs have been nothing but optimistic about him being ready to go week 1. But when do we need to start worrying about that, about whether or not he's going to be available for them? Because we talked a month ago, sounds like he's going to be ready. He's going to be fine. He's going to be good to go. And now a month later, he is still not shed that non-contact jersey.
Well, I just think he's just moving well, and I think the Chiefs are being overcautious with this. I know that there has been a story out there with the Toney situation where there's a quote where organizationally that they think that Toney will be ready for week 1. Well, maybe, but this is also an organization that has showed us over the years that they're going to be more cautious than just throwing a guy back into the fire. And I think you're seeing that with Pacheco. I have full confidence that Pacheco would be fine going in a full contact practice today based upon what I've seen. I think they're making sure they take the extra weeks, plural, just to make sure that he's okay to go. And there had been a date out there. I believe it was James Palmer of NFL Network found out that August 20th was the date they were eyeing, which makes sense. That would be the first few practices after that second preseason game. I don't think Isaiah Pacheco really needs any preseason snaps. He may end up getting none here, but I bet that once we get back to Kansas City next week, again, that'll be after the preseason game on Monday, I highly doubt that he'll still be in that yellow non-contact jersey.
And we already mentioned Tershawn Wharton was out of practice again today. And with no Chris Jones, the interior of that defensive line might be a problem for the Chiefs in the early season, assuming they don't get something figured out and get Chris Jones back in the mix there. And they activated Tershawn Wharton off the pup, but then he's kind of been missing practice the last few days.
Yeah, as you'll listen to in our conversation with Joe Cullen, I believe you're going to put that on from the podium, Steve. I do ask about Dickerson, and I do ask about Wise. And Joe Cullen I think his sentence was about 3 seconds long. I mean, you could time it yourself when you play the podcast. I think he was trying to just be optimistic about how they've been doing behind him, but it's a significant loss if you end up not having Chris Jones for any period of time. Cullen later in the conversation was asked about Jones specifically, and he said that he thinks that he was maybe the best defensive player in the league last year, if not one of the best. And I think he's making it pretty clear that Chiefs are ready to have Jones back. Will welcome him once all this business stuff is figured out. Cullen has been in touch with Jones, and I don't know. It gave me a slight glimmer of hope that maybe we shouldn't worry about any regular season time. But it's not done until it's done. But they would miss Jones significantly just because not only the player that he is, but behind him, like I believe that Derek Notty's a solid player. I believe Turk Wharton's a solid player. Wise and Dickerson, they're doing what they can, but none of these guys come close to what Chris Jones provides. And that's why he has a little bit of leverage in this thing. And you see the stalemate continue.
Yeah, I'm still a believer that Chris Jones is just trolling at this point, and they're going to get a long-term deal done. And really, as our contributor at Arrowhead Pride, Jared Sapp, has pointed out, the Chiefs, as of right now, don't have enough cap space to finalize their 53-man roster. So they really have to figure something out. And if it's not through a Jones extension, some of those decisions get pretty tough before they can finalize their initial 53-man roster. So hopefully we have an answer on that here in the next week or so. I think would be ideal ahead of the regular season. And you mentioned if you're listening to us on the podcast page, make sure you stick around. It was assistant coach day, so we got a lot. Pete already mentioned Joe Cullen. We also heard from Dave Tobe, Andy Heck, Tom Melvin, Dave Merritt, Connor Embry, and assistant general manager Mike Borgonzi. But final thing for me, Pete, before we get out of here, final training camp practice tomorrow. Heading into camp, we talked about all of these questions heading into the regular season for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now that we're through training camp, basically, we know tomorrow's going to be a light day ahead of an off day and their preseason game on Saturday. How are you feeling after watching this team practice for the last month?
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, we can go through every position. I think quarterback Buechele's looked better than I imagined. I wondered what the Chiefs do there just because I think we saw in last game what Buechele's capable of. And, at a certain point, you have him around for so long. Is he going to get a fair shake at the QB2 nod? I don't know. So we'll see. Of course, you don't have to talk anything about Patrick Mahomes. We know what he is. Running back position, I've been a little bit pleasantly surprised at the way that Deneric Prince was playing in camp. Now, we've talked about how it seems like LaMichael Pirine is getting some looks here after the first preseason game. I still think Prince is on this roster. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it has been surprising just how much time he's gotten, but I think a lot of that just has to do with Pacheco not being available. Wide receiver, I think the Chiefs are deeper there than I came into camp. I came into camp thinking there would be no way that they would keep 7 receivers. I'm pretty sure they're going to keep 7 receivers, and Justin Ross and his ability to actually stay on the field, I think even yesterday with a bump and a bruise, and to come back and still be able to practice today, I think is a good thing. And I think it's, we talk about running back by committee so often in the NFL. This might be one of those wide receiver by committee situations where maybe it is a different guy stepping up in that room each week, be it even Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, Justin Watson, Justin Ross, Richie James, of course, is now wide open on the radar. Tight end, I think that Bushman has a chance just because Jody Fortson's no longer going to be able to play for the Chiefs this year. He's on injured reserve, I just feel like Bushman has shown enough with his catching ability in camp. If anything, he'll be on the practice squad. I like the Chiefs to start week 1 with the usual 3, Kelsey, Gray, and Bell, and I bet you that Gray's role expands this year. Offensive line, it seems like the swing tackle position is the only position available. We know that Nick Allegretti is going to be that guy behind them inside, and we'll end up seeing who wins out. I think it's still up for grabs. Wanye Morris did not have a good preseason game, whereas Prince Tega Winogo and Lucas Niang did, and I suddenly think that's open again. So remains to be seen what the Chiefs do there. On the other side of the football, it's been very apparent how much the Chiefs have missed Chris Jones. It just is a force inside. And I think just based upon some of the lack of depth that you have at the edge position, meaning like elite depth. I just feel like Chris Jones just arriving back to the team, that's going to be so important. Linebacker is as deep as any position on the roster. I think Drew Tranquill is a tremendous add. He's already playing all three positions. The fact that he can call plays was a nice development here in Kansas City and St. Joe. Just the fact that Bolton missed a practice and they ended up turning to Drew Tranquill, not Willie Gay or someone that's been here before to call the plays, I think was a great add. And look, that's the fourth linebacker in the room, so you're feeling pretty good about that position. Defensive backs, it was tough to lose Najee Johnson. I think he could have pushed for starting time. Talking to Dave Merritt today, you can tell that they really want Jalen Watson or Joshua Williams to step up. And even 1 year and change later, they don't know who the third cornerback is. You'd like to see L'Jarius Sneed on the field. He missed most of camp, which I think we've talked about already, but not a great sign. Trent McDuffie is going to be that slot guy, though. Once L'Jarius Sneed arrives here, it's going to be L'Jarius. Hopefully he's okay, and you get L'Jarius or Sneed Island, if you want to say, Trent McDuffie on the inside, and then Chiefs are using these next two preseason games. They would like it to be Watson or Williams. They don't want to do this rotation anymore. I confirmed that today, so we'll see who can win out in that room. The kickers, Steve, they're the same. There's going to be no change with the specialists. So hopefully that gives you some insight into maybe what we've learned over the past month of training camp.
That was a full roster breakdown from Pete Sweeney off the top of his head. That's a guy.
No notes.
That is a man who has been grinding St. Joe training camp practices, and we hope to get some more answers on Saturday night when the Chiefs travel to Arizona to take on the Cardinals for preseason game number 2. As always, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review everything that we do on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. Follow all our training camp coverage at arrowheadpride.com. Follow Pete on Twitter at PGSween. Reminder, no editors show today. It will be back next week. Pete and John will be back next week. They'll catch you up on all the news and everything that you need to know about the Kansas City Chiefs. And Chiefs Coast to Coast will be live at 6 p.m. this evening, so make sure you check those guys out. Aaron and Mark do a fantastic job. One more practice to go. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.